Thank you. You know, St. Louisans are such giving people. I'm sure the phones will be lighting up.
Absolutely, and there's a great need.
Absolutely. Fox 2 Chief Photographer Steve Meyers was up in Bommarito Automotive SkyFOX all morning long.
And Steve, of course, has a unique perspective. He's our chief photographer, been in the business 40 years. And as you were telling me earlier, Steve, this is a sight you never get used to.
No, you don't get used to it. No matter how many times I've done this, no matter how often I've done it, you never get used to the destruction that you see that weather creates. One of the first things we'd like to take a look at is the Harmon Estates video again, and that's that is just devastating when you look at that and you see what people have to do to rebuild their lives when they have been completely shattered. I mean, some of those houses in that particular subdivision appeared to explode. That is a very unusual thing, and I think we get a little complacent about that because we don't expect to see these giant tornadoes in an urban area. And then when something like this happens and people have to recreate their lives by picking up the pieces that they can get from their, shattered home, it is amazing. And I find it breathtaking. I always have. No matter how long I've done this, I've always found the view from SkyFOX, especially after a tornado, to be particularly important in terms of trying to get the scope of something that's going on. The next one that we'd like to go to would be out at the airport, and it is an American Airlines plane, and we've heard a lot about this plane. This is the 757 that was moved over about 20 feet from gate 12 to gate 10, and if you look at that video really close, that's a piece of metal in the vertical stabilizer in the back of that 757. Clearly something you don't see every day, and it caught our attention. It's an oddity. Certainly the plane's insured and they'll fix it, but that plane won't fly for quite some time. And then you look at some of the other devastation that for a long time we weren't able to see this morning except from up in the air, and you've noticed that they've taken all this back. They're trying to get it reassembled and then get the airport back to normal, but you can look at the material and see the mangled metal everywhere at the airport. To see this at a major metropolitan airport is astonishing for me.
And something else you were talking about earlier, Steve, you said to actually be up in the helicopter on the runway looking down at this. Now that doesn't happen every day.
That was the most unique thing. I know pilot Bill Huska was flying me today, and without him I can't have any of these shots. He's largely responsible for what we see on the air. But he remarked, and I agree with him, that it is so unusual to be out at the airport and be looking back the other way from the runway, because normally we have to sit to the south side and we look north. That wasn't necessary today because those restrictions weren't in play. The next one, if we still have the video, is a smaller area out in Bellefontaine Neighbors, and that just sort of speaks to how this thing kind of hopscotched around, and it generally went down Airport Road all the way to the east till it hit Chambers, and then it skipped over the Mississippi and into Granite City. But these people have the same kind of devastation on this cul-de-sac in Bellefontaine Neighbors, where a tree, leaned up against a house and kind of shredded the back end of the house. And I thought that was, one of those things that stuck with me, because we've all got the big trees sitting around our homes, or we know somebody who does, and they're beautiful, they're gorgeous. Mm-hmm. And then you look at them in a different light when you see what happens to your house that way.
And to look at a house like that one, I mean, it almost looks like a dollhouse. It doesn't. Oh,
it does.
Like
it doesn't look real when you tend to look at it. And the last thing I'd like to show you, if we have it, is a church, and I believe the church is in Ferguson. For the Christian folks out there, tomorrow is a huge day for them, Easter, and you can look right into this church, right into the sanctuary. There's some people looking around there, trying to assess the damage. This isn't the only church that was hit in this tornado. They're going to have to find another place for their services tomorrow, as will every other church that was hit. And I know there is at least one other one that was over in the Bridgeton area. And I found it sort of ironic in an odd way that it's a church, because we like to think of our churches as being, above the weather, and sometimes it just doesn't work out that way, and now they have to rebuild as well as everyone else has to come back, one step at a time.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, what's remarkable about that is usually in the face of such grave adversity, people band together. Mm-hmm. And with this being Easter holiday weekend, tomorrow, all the churches will be reaching out to each other to help each other.
And you could see that throughout the area today, where all this devastation was in these homes out near Harmon Estates in Bridgeton. you know, people were there when we showed up with the helicopter at 7 o'clock in the morning. They're already looking through their houses, trying to begin rebuilding their lives, taking the important things out of the house, and looking at the rest of it and moving on.
Yeah,
and with the help of neighbors and friends.
It's like as you see this destruction, you also, like you said, see the scene of folks really trying to rebuild. And when you look at some of the destruction, that's going to be an awfully tough task.
You know, every journey begins with the first step, and for these people, that's a tough journey, because you look at that destruction and you go, what do I do now? What's my first move? And I think for most of those folks, it was to go back in the house and find the things that were really important to them, and then take those things and start to rebuild their lives wherever they are able to. I mean, because many of those homes will be destroyed because they can't be rebuilt. I mean,
Absolutely.
Condemned doesn't really cover it in a lot of cases,
Right.
because there's no structure left.
Right. And you know, the thing that I always find fascinating as a journalist, and we go out into the community and we cover this type of devastation, it does have a long-lasting impact, and it also helps as a journalist to put things in perspective, make you realize what's important and what isn't. I mean,
Absolutely.
Material things can be replaced.
There's no
cannot.
question about
Sure.
that. And I always, I usually tell people that life is based sort of on want, not on need.
Right.
Because if it was based on need, we wouldn't have half of the things that we have.
Absolutely.
And so when you face this kind of devastation that these folks do, you see what they go after first. We watched a man this morning at one of the homes. He was gathering dishes out of the dining room area and stacking them up. Now, those were probably important to them as a family,
Right.
and so that's what they're taking out of it. They're taking their memories with them as best they can.
I think that's one of the things that Jay Nixon in that news conference, as he was outlining all the things the state was doing, and he talked about all the destruction, the 750 homes or so that were damaged. And the thing he pointed out is that there were no fatalities in this whole thing. He said everything that was damaged, destroyed, it can be repaired. It can be replaced. Our hearts, of course, are going out to all the families that are struggling, all the families that are facing rebuilding, but at least they're alive to be able to rebuild. And I think that's the thing. And as you looked at all that destruction, that had to go through your mind, no fatalities in this.
Oh, it does every time. I thought that in the tornado on New Year's Eve, that we had such so few injuries, and with this one being even larger, and still the same thing, few injuries. Most of them not severe. You have to give a lot of credit to the warnings that Dave and John Fuller and everybody else gave out. Without that, I don't know if it turns out that way, because most of these people were probably home last night when this happened.
Watching
those
TV.
Those cars were in garages. They were watching TV. So they were there. So obviously, they took the call. They heeded the warning. They went downstairs, and they're all around to talk about it. That makes this job very cool when that happens.
That's a telling story,
that's much better.
a powerful commentary.
The story could have turned out far worse.
Steve Meyers, thank you so much for your unique perspective. We
thanks for
appreciate
having
it.
me.
And for all your work today.
No problem.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Well, you saw the photo right here on Fox 2 News First last night, a shuttle bus teetering on the edge of the roof of the